Pack your bags, we're headed on a big old ride. With dreams of sunlit shores and the open skies. From the hills of Cyprus to where the world collides.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're taking a bit of a different route, using blog posts as our guide.
Oh, I like where this is going. Blog posts, you say?
Yeah, so we're diving into a collection of posts from a blog with, get this, the name, A New Life Planned in Cyprus.
Okay, Cyprus, sunshine, I get it, but what's the deep dive here?
Well, these posts actually document this person's trip to, wait for it, New York City.
New York City.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what makes this trip unique enough for a deep dive?
It's all in the timing. They were there in January 2014, the dead of winter.
Ah, now that's a different perspective on the city that never sleeps. Most people wouldn't willingly choose January in New York.
Right. And here's the kicker. Just before arriving in the Big Apple, they experienced those crazy floods in Staines-upon-Thames in the UK.
Wow, talk about weather whiplash.
Yeah.
From flooded streets to a frozen cityscape. That's quite the contrast. I wonder how that impacted their experience.
Absolutely. They landed JFK, and bam, that instant blast of icy air. You know that feeling when you can see your own breath? It's almost overwhelming.
It's that sensory overload that really hits you in those moments. I can almost feel it myself, that biting wind. So, what were their first impressions of the city covered in snow?
Well, Central Park, usually this vibrant green space, was transformed into this stark white expanse. They described the trees as bare branches, almost shimmering with frost. Picture perfect, but freezing.
I bet. And what about Times Square? How did they experience that iconic spot under a blanket of snow?
Okay, so imagine this. The wind is just whipping through those concrete canyons, but those giant billboards are casting this almost unreal glow on the snow-covered streets. They talked about how even in the cold, you could feel the city's energy.
It's true. That energy is always there, no matter the weather. Did they mention those classic New York moments, even in the cold? You know, like the steam rising from the subway grates?
They did. They described it as a visual reminder that life was still buzzing beneath the surface, even when everything seemed frozen solid. I love that image.
It's those little details, those observations that make a journey unique. And I imagine, in the cold, those details become even more pronounced. So where did their exploration take them next?
Next, they braved the cold and headed to Rockefeller Plaza.
Ah, another classic New York experience. Did they mention the ice skating rink?
Oh, yeah, but picture this. The mist was so thick, you could barely see the tops of the surrounding buildings. And the ice rink, practically empty. Just a couple of figures gliding across the ice.
Sounds almost magical, like they had the place to themselves. What about that famous golden statue of Prometheus?
Covered in frost, but still reaching towards the sky. It's like the city itself, persevering no matter what.
I love that. It speaks to that resilience New York is known for. Did they venture out to any other iconic landmarks?
You bet. Get this, they walked the Brooklyn Bridge in the early hours. Can you imagine?
Wow, I can only imagine having that view almost to yourself. What a unique experience.
Right. Empty streets, the East River below looking all frosty and gray, and those Gothic arches of the bridge above them, it sounds almost surreal.
It's like seeing those well-known landmarks with new eyes. Did they find refuge from the cold at any point?
Oh, they did. They ducked into Chelsea Market.
Ah, Chelsea Market. The smells, the sounds, the warmth.
They said you could practically feel the warmth radiating from the bakeries and those coffee shops, and just that buzz of conversation and activity, a welcome contrast to the quiet streets outside.
It's those sensory details that stay with you long after a trip, aren't they? Those little moments that capture the essence of a place.
And from that bustling marketplace, their exploration took a turn, a more, reflective turn, you could say.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Where did they head next?
They decided to visit the 9/11 Memorial and Museum.
Ah, that's quite a shift from the sensory overload of Times Square and the warmth of Chelsea Market. A somber experience, I imagine.
Definitely. And they really wanted to understand the impact of that day, so they opted for a guided tour.
Always a good choice for context. Did they mention anything about their guide?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting. Their guide, Ray, he was actually a survivor of the attacks.
Wow, talk about a first-hand account. That must have been incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
What details did they share about the memorial itself?
Well, they talked about the waterfalls cascading down into those pools, the sound of the water. It was a constant presence.
A poignant reminder of the lives lost.
Exactly. And those bronze parapets inscribed with the names of the victims. They said it was just this space for quiet reflection.
You can almost feel the weight of history in a place like that. Did they mention anything about the museum?
Yeah, they were really struck by the stories of the first responders, those everyday people who just risked their lives to help others.
So stories of courage and selflessness that really stay with you. Did they talk about the rebuilding efforts at all?
They did. They mentioned how the Freedom Tower, rising from the ashes, it symbolizes the city's determination to move forward.
A powerful symbol of resilience. It's amazing how a city can rebuild and reinvent itself, even after such tragedy.
Right. And it's not just the big landmarks. They talked about this small pub, O'Hara's pub, that actually survived the devastation.
Oh, I've heard of O'Hara's. Didn't it serve as a makeshift field hospital after the attack?
That's the one. And today, it's a preserved memorial, just this little pub, still standing amongst the skyscrapers.
A testament to the enduring spirit of the city and of the people who call it home. It's those small details, those hidden stories, that really bring a place to life.
Absolutely. And speaking of bringing things to life, they shared some details about their last day in the city before heading off on their next adventure. You know, it's funny how this all started with a blog about, of all things, planning a new life in Cyprus. And here we are, digging into a frigid January in New York.
It just goes to show you never know where these deep dives will lead. It's not even a travel blog, really.
Yeah.
But those experiences, they resonate, beyond any one place.
It does make you think about how we engage with, well, everything online. We often just skim the surface. But this shows how much is there when you really, linger for a bit. Let your curiosity wander.
And in this case, that wandering's brought us right back to New York. We saw those iconic landmarks, sure. But through their eyes, it's different. How the cold almost made things sharper, more real.
Yeah. And that experience at the 9/11 Memorial, that was something else. It wasn't just a visit. It was, a conversation with history, Made even more real by their guide, Ray, being a survivor.
That firsthand connection, you can't replicate that. It reminds us that history is made of people's lives, not just dates in a book. Those stories become part of the city itself.
That blend of past and present, that's what makes a city like New York what it is. And the resilience everywhere they went, from ground zero to that little pub, O'Hara's, it's like the city just keeps going no matter what.
The human spirit, right?
Yeah.
We adapt, we rebuild, find hope even in the tough times. That's a pretty powerful takeaway from a few blog posts about a January trip. And, thinking back on their whole trip, it really highlights what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
What's that?
It's not just about the places they visited. It's how they experienced those places, the details that stood out to them, the emotions they felt.
So it becomes their unique New York story, not just a rehash of some guidebook.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the beauty of travel, isn't it? It's a deeply personal experience. Even when you're visiting those iconic landmarks, what you take away from it is uniquely yours.
It makes you want to dig through your own travel memories, rediscover those moments that truly resonated.
Or better yet, it makes you want to create some new ones. So tell me, what will your New York story be?
We're following a travel blog from way back in January of 2014. This couple, Rob and Mandy, took this awesome Caribbean cruise, and they blogged the whole thing.
From what I remember, they were living in Cyprus at the time.
You've got that right. So we're talking about a journey from, the chilly streets of New York.
Straight to those sunny Caribbean shores.
Exactly. We're talking highlights, funny moments, and all those little details that make you feel like you're right there with them.
Oh, I love that. It's amazing how a well-written travel blog can really transport you, even years later, right?
Totally. Okay, so picture this. It's January in New York City. Rob and Mandy are, all set to cast off on this ship called the Explorer of the Seas.
I know this ship. It's huge.
Right. But before they even hit the open ocean, they had this incredible experience just getting out of the harbor.
Oh, yeah. Going under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Right.
You got it. And apparently the clearance was, ridiculously low.
We're talking, what, just a few feet between the top of the ship and the bridge?
Seriously. They said the captain even sounded the ship's horn as they passed under. Can you imagine being on deck, watching that massive bridge loom closer and closer?
Oh, talk about a dramatic send-off. That must have been incredible. It really gives you a sense of the sheer scale of those cruise ships.
Right. They said stepping onto the Explorer of the Seas was like entering a floating city.
And it's true, those mega ships are like self-contained worlds. Shops, restaurants, pools, theaters.
Don't forget the belly flop competition.
Of course. How could I forget? It's practically a cruise tradition. But seriously, with all that going on, it must have been a bit overwhelming at first. In a good way, of course.
Definitely. They said the first couple of days at sea were a whirlwind.
So what kind of stuff did they get up to? Fill me in.
Well, for starters, they managed to catch a performance by the 60s group, The Happenings.
See you in September. Now that's a classic. I bet that was a fun blast from the past.
Totally. Apparently, The Happenings put on a really polished performance full of those classic 60s vibes.
I can only imagine. Where did they see them? Did they say?
Yeah, they saw them in one of the ship's theaters. It was called The Place, and they said it was totally decked out for the show.
Now, that's what I call a unique cruise ship experience. But knowing Rob and Mandy, I have a feeling their next adventure involved a little more splashing.
Oh, we're getting to the belly flop competition, right?
I had to ask. It's amazing how a bunch of adults willingly flinging themselves into a pool can be so entertaining.
It's like a train wreck, but you can't look away.
Exactly. So set the scene for me. What was the vibe like?
Okay, so picture this. The pool deck is packed. Everyone's, soaking up the sun, anticipating some epic splashes. They even had an MC, hyping up the crowd.
Oh, I bet the MC really brought the energy. Were there any crazy outfits?
Oh, absolutely. Think like Hawaiian shirts, those brightly colored swim trunks. A few people went all out with floaties and goggles just to add to the aesthetic of their flops. Really selling it.
I love it. It's all about committing to the flop, right? Oh, man. I bet there were some legendary belly flops that day.
I can only imagine the form, the commitment.
All about letting loose,
Oh.
Embracing the unexpected. You're surrounded by strangers, trying something you'd never do back home, just laughing at the spectacle.
I feel like that's a good way to sum up the whole cruise experience, right?
Absolutely. It's liberating. And speaking of embracing the unexpected, Rob and Mandy's next stop takes them to a place that's a bit off the beaten path. Labadee.
Hey, Labadee. Now, that's not your typical tourist destination, is it?
Not quite. It's actually leased by Royal Caribbean, so it's essentially a private beach resort just for their cruise ships.
Wow. A whole private island experience. Talk about exclusive.
Right, imagine. Turquoise waters, lush mountains. They said the beaches were amazing powdery white sand.
Oh, man. I can only imagine. Did they say what they actually did there?
Oh, they soaked up the sun. They had a beachside barbecue. They even picked up some souvenirs from the local vendors.
Oh, that's great. So they had a chance to interact with the locals a bit, even in a more controlled setting.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just a, completely isolated experience.
I love that. It adds a whole other dimension to the trip, I think. But wait, didn't you say the cruise ship entertainment followed them everywhere? Don't tell me they had a belly flop contest in Labadee, too.
No more belly flops. This time, it was the comedic stylings of Lay and Erky.
Oh, right. The cruise directors.
Yep, that dynamic duo all the way from Turkey.
I love those, too. They were always up to something.
They brought their act to Labadee.
Yeah.
Provided some extra laughs on the beach, apparently.
Oh, man. It's amazing how those cruise directors become such a memorable part of the whole experience, They really set the tone.
They do. They add that personal touch,
Yeah.
But enough about Labadee. Let's set sail for their next adventure. Rob and Mandy were headed to Samana in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, the Dominican Republic. I've always wanted to go.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Samana is known for its natural beauty.
What stood out to them about it?
Well, first off, sailing into the bay. It's this stunning bay, completely surrounded by these rolling hills, just blanketed in greenery. They said it was breathtaking.
I bet.
And from their cabin balcony, they witnessed the most incredible sunset over the bay.
Oh, wow.
They said it was amazing.
I can only imagine those colors.
Exactly. Now, they didn't spend a ton of time in the town of Samana itself. It was mainly a stopping point for some rainforest excursions.
Oh, okay.
But even in passing, they captured these little details. Street vendors selling handmade crafts, the aroma of fresh coconuts.
It's those little things,
Exactly, little snapshots of everyday life. But, in this new and exciting place.
Love that. I'm ready for more island hopping, though. Where to next?
Next up, St. Thomas.
Oh, nice. The U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yep. Picture this. They're sailing into Charlotte Amalie. The harbor is just bustling with boats. And that iconic Fort Christian clock tower standing tall against the skyline.
Oh, I love that.
It's like a postcard, right?
Totally. Did they have any adventures in St. Thomas?
Adventures, oh yeah. They hopped aboard this beautiful schooner called Bones.
No way.
And they even got to snorkel with green sea turtles at a place called Turtle Cove.
Wow. Snorkeling with sea turtles. Okay, that's bucket list material for sure.
Right. And then they went to Honeymoon Cove.
Okay, Honeymoon Cove. I'm intrigued.
It's this secluded little slice of paradise, and they had a BBQ lunch there.
Okay, you had me at barbecue.
Local cooks, fresh-caught fish, sizzling on the grill.
Oh, man. That sounds incredible. There's something about, like, authentic local food when you're traveling. It just adds a whole other level to the experience.
100%. It creates such a connection to the place and the people.
Mm.
And speaking of special moments, their next stop was all about celebrating.
Oh, why's that?
It was Mandy's birthday.
No way! A birthday in, where was it?
San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Now that is how you celebrate. What did they get up to, did they say?
Well, they sailed into the harbor, and they were greeted by this incredible view of Castillo San Felipe del Moro.
Oh, wow. I've seen pictures.
It's impressive, right? This
Yeah.
imposing fortress right at the entrance to the bay.
Steeped in history, you just, like, you want to know all the stories, you know?
Right, and then Old San Juan itself. The cobblestone streets, the colorful buildings, the energy.
Oh, I love Old San Juan. Did they mention where they had Mandy's birthday dinner?
They went to this place called Aranumo.
Baranumo. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up. What's it like?
It's a trendy spot, known for its cocktails and tapas. And the atmosphere is great minimalist decor, warm, with these little touches of, Puerto Rican flair. Very
You
cool.
bet. Intimate, stylish, but with that local flavor,
Exactly. But sadly, all good things must come to an end. Even amazing Caribbean cruises.
I know. Back to reality. Did Rob and Mandy mention the trip back home at all?
They did, and it sounds like they were in for a bit of a shock.
Oh, no. What happened?
Picture this.
Hmm.
They're getting off the ship in New York, and they're greeted by heavy snowfall.
Oh, no. Talk about a rude awakening.
Right, and to make matters worse, getting from the port to JFK was a complete nightmare.
Oh, traffic delays.
The whole 9 yards. By the time they got to the airport, most flights had been canceled.
Oh, that's the worst. Being so close to home, but it feels a million miles away.
Tell me about it. But thankfully, their British Airways flight did manage to leave.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of a delay, but still. And they actually had a crazy fast flight back to London. Strong tailwind, apparently.
Wow. Well, thank goodness for that, at least. But it's funny how one trip can be such a mix of experiences, Like from those peaceful beaches to the energy of San Juan, and then, bam, back to reality, and a snowy one at that.
It's true. But it's also kind of what makes their story so relatable, I mean, even with the best laid plans, you can't predict everything.
That is so true. Sometimes those unexpected things, even the not-so-fun ones, become part of the story.
100%.
Mm.
But reflecting on Rob and Mandy's trip,
Mm-hmm.
what resonated with you the most? Was it like escaping to those amazing islands or exploring those vibrant cities?
For me, it really is that idea of escape, just like you said, and not just geographically, but like escaping the everyday routine.
Yeah.
Just embracing something totally different.
That's it exactly. And whether it's a secluded beach in Haiti or, like you said, a busy street in San Juan, travel lets us see the world in a new way.
It really does. And for our listeners, hopefully this deep dive inspires you to plan your own escapes, big or small.
Exactly. Because those unexpected moments, the ones you could never plan for, those often become the best memories.
So true. Embrace that adventure, right? And who knows, maybe you'll have some amazing travel stories of your own to tell someday.
Exactly. Safe travels, everyone.
Your life plan where we never hide.